Jake Morrison sat in the large meeting room and looked across the table at the alien beings who claimed to represent peace. The room was huge and made of some kind of white stone that seemed to glow from within. Tall windows showed the stars. Outside the space station where these talks had been going on for 18 long months. Jake was tired of it all. High Chancellor Vexthara sat directly across from him. She was tall and thin with blue skin and 4 arms. Her people were called the Zephyrians, and they seemed to think they were better than everyone else in the galaxy. Next to her sat other aliens from different worlds, all part of something called the Galactic Council. They all looked down on humans like they were children who needed to be taught how to behave. Captain Lisa Harper sat next to Jake. She was his military advisor and had fought in the war against these same aliens 3 years ago. The war had lasted 3 years and ended when both sides got too tired to keep fighting. Now they were supposed to make peace, but the aliens wanted everything and offered almost nothing in return. Jake looked at the papers in front of him. The aliens wanted Earth to give them access to human factories and how humans made things. They wanted to know all about human military secrets. They wanted humans to become part of their economic system, where Earth would be like a small partner who had to follow all the rules but had no say in making them. In return, they offered to let humans stay in their home solar system and maybe trade with a few nearby worlds. The worst part was how they talked about it. Every time Jake or Lisa tried to negotiate better terms, the aliens would smile in that way that made it clear they thought humans were stupid. High Chancellor Vexthara would wave one of her 4 hands and explain that humans were too young as a species to understand how the galaxy really worked. She said humans were too aggressive and needed the wisdom of older species to guide them. Lisa had stopped talking much during the meetings. Jake could see the anger in her eyes every time the aliens dismissed another human request. She had commanded a battle cruiser during the war and seen good people die fighting these same beings. Now she had to sit here and listen to them act like they were doing humans a favor by not destroying Earth completely. The meeting today started like all the others. Chancellor Vexthara spread out holographic documents that showed the latest version of their peace treaty. Jake read through it and felt his heart sink. It was worse than the last version. Now they wanted humans to reduce their military to almost nothing. They wanted Earth to share all new technology with the Council before humans could use it themselves. They even wanted the right to put Council representatives in human government meetings to make sure humans were following all the rules. Jake looked up at the Chancellor. This is not acceptable. You are asking us to give up our independence completely. The Chancellor made a sound that might have been laughter among her people. Ambassador Morrison, your species is barely 300 years into space travel. You have been to only a few dozen star systems. We have been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years. We know what works and what does not work. Trust our experience, Lisa spoke up for the first time in hours. Your experience includes starting a war with us that you could not win. Several of the aliens made angry noises. A being that looked like a giant insect clicked its mandibles. Humans are violent and unpredictable. This is exactly why you need our guidance. You cannot be trusted to make decisions that affect the entire galaxy. Jake felt something break inside him. 18 months of this. 18 months of being talked down to like he was a child. 18 months of offering compromise after compromise while these beings demanded more and more. He thought about Earth and the billions of humans who were counting on him to bring home a fair deal. He thought about the soldiers who had died in the war. Believing they were fighting for human freedom and dignity, the Chancellor was still talking. Your manufacturing capabilities are primitive but show promise. Under our guidance, human workers can contribute to galactic prosperity. Your military tactics, while crude, have some interesting elements that our strategists wish to study. We are offering you the chance to become a junior member of galactic civilization. This is a generous offer. Jake started putting his papers back in his briefcase. The aliens stopped talking and watched him with confusion. They were not used to anyone walking away from their negotiations. What are you doing? Asked the insect being. Jake closed his briefcase and stood up. Lisa was already on her feet beside him. "We are done here." The Chancellor's 4 eyes went wide. "You cannot simply leave. These negotiations are for the good of your entire species." Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked shocked. Others looked angry. A few seemed confused, like they could not believe humans would reject such a wonderful opportunity to serve their betters. "You want us to give up everything that makes us human," Jake said. "You want us to become your servants and call it peace. We fought a war to stay free, and we will not give up that freedom at a negotiating table." Lisa was already walking toward the door. Jake followed her. Behind them, the aliens were making all kinds of noises. The Chancellor was calling his name, demanding that he return to the table. Other voices were shouting in languages Jake did not understand. Jake did not look back. He and Lisa walked through the corridors of the space station toward their ship. Human security guards who had been waiting outside the meeting room fell into step behind them. Everyone was quiet until they reached their shuttle. "Sir," Lisa said as they climbed aboard, "what happens now?" Jake looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, and Earth was full of humans who would not bow down to anyone. Now we go home and tell our people that the Galactic Council does not want peace. They want surrender. And humans do not surrender. The shuttle pulled away from the space station. Behind them, the aliens were probably still arguing about what had just happened. They would learn soon enough that humans meant what they said. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. Council member Zarqueen stood at the center of the great chamber where the Galactic Council met to decide the fate of entire worlds. The chamber was carved from a single massive crystal that had taken the hegemony's best workers 50 years to complete. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in floating platforms that moved in slow circles around the speaking floor. Today they were all here to talk about the humans. 3 days had passed since Ambassador Morrison had walked out of the peace talks. Zarqueen was confident this was just a trick that humans were using to try to get better terms. His people had been part of the council for over 2,000 years, and they had seen this kind of behavior before. Young species often acted tough until reality hit them, then they came back asking for help. "The humans are testing us," Zarqueen announced to the assembled delegates. "They want us to believe they are willing to stand alone against the entire galaxy, but we know better. No single species can survive without the Council's protection and trade networks. They will return within a few months, and when they do, we should be ready with even stricter terms." Many of the delegates made sounds of agreement. The Aquarian representative, a being that looked like a jellyfish floating in a water tank, pulsed with approval. "Humans have no understanding of galactic economics. They need our trade routes to survive. Without access to rare minerals from the outer rim, their technology will fall behind within a year." Chancellor Vexthara had remained quiet since the humans left, but now she stood to address the council. "I have studied the human delegation carefully during our 18 months of negotiations. They are emotional beings who make decisions based on pride rather than logic. This walkout is exactly the kind of impulsive behavior we expect from a species that has not learned proper civilization." Dr. Kellara Moonwhisper floated up from her position in the academic section. She was the council's chief expert on alien psychology and had written several papers about human behavior during the recent war. Her species, the Ethereals, were known for their ability to understand the minds of other beings. "Honorable Council members," Dr. Moonwhisper began in her soft, musical voice, "I have completed my analysis of human psychological patterns. Despite their apparent aggression during the war, humans are fundamentally a submissive species once their initial defensive reactions are overcome. Their social structures show clear hierarchical tendencies, and they respond well to firm guidance from authority figures." She activated a holographic display that showed charts and graphs of human behavior patterns. "You can see here that human military resistance decreased significantly in the final year of the war. This indicates that their aggressive phase was ending and they were becoming ready to accept proper leadership. Ambassador Morrison's departure is likely a final expression of residual hostility. before they accept their proper place in galactic society. The council members studied the data with interest. It all seemed to make sense. Humans had fought hard for 3 years, but toward the end they had seemed less willing to engage in major battles. Their withdrawal from the peace talks was probably just like an animal showing its teeth one last time before accepting a new master. Zerquin nodded approvingly. Dr. Moonwhisper's analysis confirms what we already suspected. The question now is how to respond to this behavior in a way that brings humans back to the negotiating table quickly. The debate that followed was brief. Most council members agreed that economic pressure would be the most effective tool. Humans were dependent on trade with council worlds for many resources they could not get in their small area of space. If that trade was cut off, human civilization would begin to struggle within months. Admiral Tothran was given the task of enforcing the new policy. He was a veteran commander from the Draconian Empire and had fought against humans during the war. His fleets were positioned at key hyperspace jump points around human space. The blockade would not be aggressive. The Council did not want to restart the war, but it would be complete. No ships would be allowed to enter or leave human territory until Earth agreed to return to negotiations. The Admiral was confident in his mission. Humans are clever fighters, but they are not a trading species like the Merchants Guild or the Nexus Collective. They do not have the economic relationships needed to survive isolation. Their government will fall within 6 months when their people realize what independence really costs. While the Council planned their blockade, news of the human walkout was spreading through the galaxy. Most species that heard about it shook their heads in amazement. The humans must be crazy to reject the Council's generous offer. Everyone knew that trying to exist outside the Council's protection was suicide. On Earth, President Danny Collins was preparing to address the United Earth Assembly. The news of the failed peace talks had reached home 3 days ago, and public opinion was running hot. Some people were angry that their representatives had walked away from a deal that might have prevented future conflict. Others were proud that humanity had refused to surrender its independence. Collins stood at the podium in the Great Hall where Earth's government met to make decisions. Representatives from every nation and colony were present, either in person or through holographic connection. The president was a former military officer who had commanded ground forces during the war. The aliens had never faced him in battle, but they were about to learn what kind of leader he was. "My fellow humans," Collins began, "3 days ago our representatives walked away from negotiations with the Galactic Council. They did this because the Council was not offering peace. They were demanding surrender. They wanted us to give up our freedom, our independence, and our right to determine our own future." The hall was completely silent. Every person was focused on the president's words. "The Council believes we will come crawling back to them when we realize how hard it is to stand alone. They think we are like other species they have conquered over the centuries. They think we will choose comfort over freedom, safety over independence. They are wrong." Collins activated a holographic display that showed star charts of human space and the surrounding regions. "Today I am announcing the New Horizon Initiative. We will not wait for the Council to accept us as equals. We will not beg for permission to exist. We will forge our own path among the stars." The president outlined plans for expanded exploration, new colony ships, and increased military production. Earth would not just survive outside the Council system, it would thrive. The Assembly voted unanimously to support the new policy. As Collins finished his speech, Admiral Tothran's ships were taking their positions around human space. The Admiral was pleased with how quickly the blockade was being established. Soon, the humans would discover that pride was expensive and freedom was not free. When they came back to ask for mercy, the Council would be ready with terms that would make the original offer look generous. Neither the Admiral nor the Council members suspected that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Dr. Amy Rodriguez stood in her laboratory on Earth's moon, looking at pieces of alien technology that had been captured during the war. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the peace talks, and the Galactic Council's blockade was supposed to be strangling human civilization. Instead, Amy was busier than she had ever been in her life. The Council had made one big mistake when they started their blockade. They assumed humans would just sit in their home system and wait for starvation to force them back to the negotiating table. But humans had never been good at sitting still and waiting for other people to solve their problems. Instead of panicking about the blockade, human scientists and engineers had gone to work. Amy picked up a piece of Zephyrian computer technology and smiled. When the aliens had retreated after the war, they had left behind damaged ships and equipment. The Council probably thought this was not important because the technology was old and broken. They did not understand how humans thought. Where aliens saw worthless junk, humans saw puzzles to be solved. Her team had spent 3 years studying every piece of alien equipment they could find. They had figured out how Council computers worked, how their engines created power, and how their weapons systems operated. More importantly, they had found ways to make all of these things work better. Humans were good at taking someone else's idea and improving it. The laboratory door opened and Bobby Kim walked in. He was the chief engineer for the New Horizon project, and one of Amy's oldest friends. Bobby had been working on spacecraft design since before the war started, and now he was building ships that combined the best of human and alien technology. "Amy, you need to see what we have accomplished in the shipyards," Bobby said with excitement in his voice. "The first batch of hybrid vessels is ready for testing, and they are incredible." Amy followed Bobby to the observation deck that looked out over Luna's main construction facility. The sight that greeted her took her breath away. 3 massive ships floated in the construction bay, and they looked like nothing that had ever been built before. They had the sleek lines of Council vessels, but with the heavy armor and weapon placements that made human ships so effective in battle. "We took the Zephyrian engine design and made it 30% more efficient," Bobby explained. "The Council species have always been conservative in their engineering. They build things to last for centuries without changes. But humans are not afraid to experiment. We pushed their technology to limits they never imagined." While Amy and Bobby were admiring the new ships, Captain Steve Carter was already testing similar technology in deep space. His ship, the New Dawn, was part of humanity's new exploration program. Instead of waiting for the Council to give them permission to visit new worlds, humans had decided to find their own. Steve's mission was to explore regions of space that the Council had never bothered to survey. The aliens controlled the main hyperspace routes between established civilizations, but there were vast areas of the galaxy that remained unexplored. The Council had always assumed these regions were empty or worthless. They were wrong about that too. "Captain, we are picking up mineral signatures from the 4th planet," reported Lieutenant Jenny Walsh, the ship's science officer. "The readings show heavy concentrations of rare earth elements and what appears to be crystalline formations similar to those used in Council technology." Steve studied the data on his command screen. This was the 3rd system they had explored in the past month, and the 3rd system that contained resources the Council claimed did not exist in this region. The aliens had been so focused on controlling established trade routes that they had never looked for new ones. "Begin full planetary survey," Steve ordered. "And prepare a message for Earth Command. We have found another gold mine." Back on Earth, President Collins was meeting with General Patricia Stone in the Pentagon's Situation Room. Patricia had been promoted to head of Earth's military forces after the previous commander died in the war. She was known for being tough, smart, and completely unwilling to back down from any fight. "Madam General, what is the status of our military buildup?" Collins asked. Patricia activated a holographic display that showed ship production numbers, training schedules, and deployment plans. "Mr. President, our forces are growing faster than we had hoped. The new hybrid technology is allowing us to build ships that are more powerful than anything we had during the war. More importantly, our manufacturing capacity has increased by 40% since the blockade began." Collins looked surprised. "How is that possible?" "The Council cut off our access to their trade networks." "That is exactly why it is possible," Patricia replied. We were importing raw materials and finished goods from council worlds, which meant our own industries were not working at full capacity. When the blockade forced us to become self-sufficient, we discovered we had been wasting our potential. Human workers are more productive when they have to be. The general showed Collins detailed reports about Earth's industrial expansion. Factories that had been running at partial capacity were now working around the clock. Mining operations in the asteroid belt had tripled their output. Most importantly, human engineers were designing new manufacturing processes that were more efficient than anything the Council used. The aliens think like bureaucrats, Patricia explained. They have rules and procedures for everything, and they never change methods that have worked for centuries. Humans think like problem solvers. When we hit an obstacle, we find a way around it or through it, or we build something that makes the obstacle irrelevant. While Earth's industries were expanding, Captain Steve Carter was making another discovery that would change everything. His exploration of uncharted space had led him to a system that contained something unexpected, another intelligent species. The beings called themselves the Korthek, and they were refugees. Their homeworld had been destroyed in a war with the Council 50 years ago, and the survivors had been wandering through unexplored space ever since. They were not advanced enough to be considered a threat by the Council, but they were smart enough to hate the aliens who had killed their people. "Captain Carter," said Korthek leader Vex High through the translation system, "we have heard stories of humans who fight the Council. Is this true?" Steve chose his words carefully. "We recently fought a war against them. Now we are exploring space beyond their control." Vex High made a sound that the translator interpreted as approval. "The Council believes they own the galaxy. They take what they want from species that cannot defend themselves. If humans truly stand against them, then perhaps there is hope for justice." The meeting with the Korthek was the beginning of something the Council had never expected. Humans were not just exploring empty space, they were finding allies. Species that had been conquered, enslaved, or driven from their homes by the Council were scattered throughout the unexplored regions. Most of them had given up hope of ever fighting back, but the news that humans had successfully resisted Council power gave them new courage. Colonel Frank Davis was commanding a patrol near the edge of human space when he encountered the first sign that the Council was beginning to take notice of human activities. A Zephyrian scout ship appeared at the edge of the system and began scanning the human mining operation. On the third planet, Frank opened a communication channel to the alien vessel. "This is Colonel Davis of the Terran Defense Force. You are in Earth-claimed territory. Please state your business." The Zephyrian captain responded with the arrogant tone that humans had learned to expect from Council species. "This system is unclaimed territory according to galactic law. Your presence here is illegal." Frank smiled. "According to whose galactic law?" "We never signed any treaties recognizing Council authority over unclaimed systems. This system now belongs to Earth. You have 10 minutes to leave before we consider your presence an act of aggression." The alien captain was clearly shocked by the human response. For centuries, the Council had been able to go anywhere they wanted and take anything they desired. No one had ever told them to leave before. "You cannot simply claim entire star systems." The Zephyrian protested. The Council will not allow this expansion." "The Council is welcome to try to stop us," Frank replied calmly. "But I should warn you that our ships are much better than they were during the war. Your intelligence reports are probably out of date." The alien scout ship left the system without further argument, but Frank knew this was just the beginning. Soon the Council would realize that their blockade had not weakened humanity, it had made them stronger and more independent than ever before. High Chancellor Vexthara sat in her private office aboard the Council's greatest space station and stared at reports that made no sense. 1 year had passed since the humans walked away from the peace talks, and everything the Council had predicted was wrong. Instead of collapsing under the pressure of economic isolation, human civilization was expanding faster than ever before. The latest intelligence report lay open on her desk. Human exploration fleets had claimed 42 star systems in the past 12 months. They had established mining operations, defense platforms, and permanent colonies with a speed that seemed impossible. Even more disturbing, they had done all of this without violating any existing territorial agreements, because they were expanding into regions that the Council had never bothered to explore. Vexthara activated her communication system and called for an emergency meeting with the Council's military leadership. Admiral Tothran arrived within the hour, looking confused and frustrated. His blockade had been perfect. No ships had entered or left human space for months. By all logic, the humans should be starving by now. Admiral, explain to me how the humans are expanding their territory while under complete blockade, Vexthara demanded. Tothran spread holographic star charts across the Chancellor's desk. Red markers showed the positions of his fleet around human space. Blue markers showed new human colonies and outposts. The blue markers were everywhere except in the areas his ships were watching. They are not using the established hyperspace routes, the Admiral admitted. Our blockade covers all known jump points between human space and Council territory. But the humans appear to have developed their own navigation methods that allow them to reach unexplored regions directly. Vexthara studied the charts with growing alarm. The Council's entire strategy had been based on controlling the hyperspace routes that connected different parts of the galaxy. If humans could travel through space without using those routes, then the blockade was meaningless. How is this possible? She asked. Our scientists assured us that their technology was inferior to ours. It was inferior when the war ended, Tothran replied. But we now have evidence that they have been improving it rapidly. 3 days ago, one of our patrol ships encountered a human vessel in the Kepler sector. The human ship was faster, more heavily armed, and used technology we did not recognize. The Chancellor felt a cold fear settling in her chest. Did we capture this vessel for study? No, Chancellor. The human commander informed our captain that he was in Earth-claimed territory and ordered our ship to leave. When our captain refused, the human vessel disabled our engines and weapons in less than 30 seconds. Our ship was forced to withdraw. Vexthara was quiet for a long moment. During the war, human ships had been tough and well-armed, but they had not been significantly superior to Council vessels. If humans now had ships that could defeat Council warships easily, then everything had changed. While the Chancellor was discovering the military implications of human independence, other Council members were facing economic problems. Director Carl Johnson of the Terran Trade Consortium was revolutionizing galactic commerce in ways that the Council had never imagined possible. Carl had been a successful businessman before the war, but the Council's blockade had forced him to think in completely new ways. If humans could not trade with Council worlds, then they would have to find other customers. The problem was that most of the galaxy's trade was controlled by the Council, so there seemed to be no other markets available. That was when Carl realized that the Council had been making the same mistake in economics that they made in exploration. They focused on the big, established markets and ignored smaller opportunities. There were hundreds of minor species scattered throughout the galaxy who had resources to sell and needs to fill, but the Council considered them too small to be worth attention. Carl's solution was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to compete with the Council for major trade routes, humans would create new trade routes connecting species that had never dealt with each other before. A mining colony that needed manufactured goods could be connected with a factory world that needed raw materials. Both sides would benefit, and humans would profit by making the connection possible. The results were dramatic. Within 6 months, the Terran Trade Consortium was handling commercial relationships that involved dozens of species across hundreds of systems. Many of these species had never traded with anyone except the Council before, and they were amazed by the better prices and more flexible terms that humans offered. The economic impact was felt first on the rim worlds where the Council's control was weakest. Planet after planet began shifting their trade relationships toward the human network. The Council's tax revenues from these worlds dropped significantly, and several Council member species began to complain about lost profits. The military situation became critical when Admiral Betty Walsh led the Human Deep Space Fleet into its first major engagement. Betty had been a squadron commander during the war and was known for aggressive tactics and innovative strategies. Her fleet was built around the new hybrid technology that combined human and alien designs. The battle occurred in the Rigel system, where humans had established a mining colony 6 months earlier. A council task force arrived to reclaim the system, claiming that it had always been part of their territory even though they had never actually occupied it. The council commander, Admiral Yokstar of the Hegemony, expected an easy victory against the primitive human forces. He was wrong. Betty's ships were faster, more maneuverable, and better armed than anything the council had faced before. More importantly, they were crewed by veterans of the 3-year war who had learned how to fight against superior numbers. The battle lasted only 4 hours, and when it was over, most of the council fleet was either destroyed or disabled. Admiral Yokstar barely escaped with his flagship and a handful of escort vessels. His report to the council was devastating. Human military technology had advanced so far beyond council capabilities that the war balance had completely reversed. Where council ships had once held a slight advantage, human vessels were now clearly superior. News of the defeat spread quickly through council space. Species that had resented council dominance for centuries began to question whether the alliance was as strong as it appeared. Some even began reaching out to Earth through secret diplomatic channels, asking about trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Dr. Kalara Moonwhisper was forced to admit that her psychological analysis of humans had been completely wrong. She appeared before the council to present a revised assessment that contradicted everything she had said before. "Honorable council members," she began, her musical voice now strained with embarrassment, "I must inform you that my previous evaluation of human psychology was based on incomplete data. Humans do not seek approval or guidance from authority figures. Instead, they respond to challenges by becoming more independent and innovative." The council chamber was silent as she continued. "The species we dismissed as young and aggressive has proven capable of rapid adaptation and growth. They do not need our protection or our trade networks. In fact, isolation from our influence appears to have accelerated their development rather than hindering it." Chancellor Vextara stood slowly. "Dr. Moonwhisper, are you telling us that our entire strategy was based on false assumptions?" "Yes, Chancellor. We believe that cutting humans off from galactic civilization would force them to accept our leadership. Instead, it motivated them to create their own civilization that is now competing with ours successfully. The implications were staggering. Not only had the council failed to control humanity, but they had accidentally created a rival power that was growing stronger every day. Human technology was advancing rapidly, human territory was expanding constantly, and human allies were multiplying throughout the galaxy. As the council members absorbed this information, Betty Walsh was already planning her next operation. The victory at Rigel had proven that human forces could defeat council fleets in direct combat. Now, it was time to demonstrate that humans could also defend their new allies from council retaliation. The message was clear to everyone in the galaxy. Humanity had not just walked away from the peace talks. They had walked into a future where they no longer needed the council's permission for anything. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, and there was nothing the council could do to stop it. President Danny Collins stood at the window of his office in Geneva and looked out at the city where human civilization had once seemed so small and fragile. 2 years had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the peace talks with the Galactic Council, and the world had changed in ways that nobody could have imagined. Earth was no longer just a single planet struggling to find its place in the galaxy. It was the center of a growing federation that spanned 60 star systems and was allied with dozens of other species. The Terran Federation had been officially established 6 months ago when the colonies and allied worlds voted to create a unified government. Collins had been elected as the first president of this new nation that stretched across light years of space. His victory had been overwhelming, with voters supporting his platform of continued independence and expansion. The people of Earth and its colonies had no interest in bowing to alien masters. No matter how ancient or powerful they claimed to be, a soft chime indicated that his secretary was announcing a visitor. Jake Morrison entered the office, now carrying the title of Secretary of State for the Terran Federation. The man who had walked away from the peace talks had become one of the most important diplomats in the galaxy, but not because he made deals with the Council. Instead, he spent his time building relationships with the species that the Council had ignored or oppressed for centuries. "Mr. President," Jake said as he took a seat across from Collins's desk, "we have received another communication from the Galactic Council. High Chancellor Vexthara is requesting that we reopen diplomatic negotiations." Collins smiled without humor. "What are they offering this time?" Jake activated a holographic display that showed the Council's latest proposal. Full membership in the Council with equal voting rights, access to all established trade routes, and recognition of our territorial claims in the systems we have already colonized. They are also offering to share advanced Council technology and provide security guarantees for all human settlements. And what do they want in return? Nothing specific in writing, but the subtext is clear. They want us to stop expanding, stop forming alliances with non-Council species, and stop competing with their economic interests. Essentially, they want us to become a normal Council member who follows the established rules and does not rock the boat. Collins walked over to his window and looked up at the sky where the lights of orbital construction platforms were visible, even in daylight. Human shipyards were working around the clock to build exploration vessels, colony ships, and defense platforms. The industrial capacity that the Council had dismissed as primitive was now producing technology that surpassed anything in their fleets. "What did you tell them, Jake?" "I told them we would consider their offer carefully and provide a response within the week." Collins turned back to his Secretary of State. "And what will that response be?" Jake's expression was the same calm determination he had shown when walking out of the peace talks 2 years earlier. "I will tell them that we are not interested in joining their club. We tried to work with them as equals, and they made it clear that they saw us as children who needed their guidance. Now they want to treat us as equals because they realize we are no longer children. But we have grown up, and we do not need their approval anymore." While Collins and Jake were planning their response to the Council, the alien government was facing internal problems that grew worse every day. Several Council member species were openly questioning the leadership that had allowed Earth to slip away from their control. The economic benefits of human trade and innovation were now flowing to Council enemies and competitors. While Council worlds faced shortages and rising prices, High Chancellor Vexthara was meeting with her closest advisors in a conference room that had been designed to project power and authority. The massive chamber with its crystal walls and floating platforms seemed smaller now, as if the universe itself had shrunk around them. The Chancellor looked older than she had 2 years ago, and her forearms moved with less confidence than before. "The hegemony delegation is demanding explanations," reported Council member Zerquine. 3 of their major industrial worlds have experienced civil unrest because their populations want access to human consumer goods and technology. The hegemony leadership is asking why we allowed humans to develop superior products when we should have been controlling their research and development. Chancellor Vexthara felt the weight of decisions that could not be undone. "What is the status of our attempt to reopen negotiations with Earth?" "Secretary Morrison has responded to our offer," Zerquine replied. "He says that the Terran Federation appreciates our interest but is not seeking Council membership at this time. He suggests that if we wish to establish diplomatic relations, we should apply through normal channels like any other foreign government." The Chancellor made a sound of frustration that translated poorly across.